Welcome to the second in our series on the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Today we'll be covering the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. A quick refresher on the 7 wonders of the ancient world. They were listed by Philo of Byzantium as the 7 places that any self-respecting Greek simply had to visit if they were traveling in the greater Greek-speaking world. They were chosen both for being great works of art and great feats of engineering. Now, the story of the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus begins over 3,000 years ago during the 2nd millennium BC. A meteor struck the earth at a grove of trees near what would become the Greek city of Ephesus. The grove at the impact site became sacred to the people of the region and later a popular place for travelers and pilgrims. According to legend, a group of ferocious Amazon women fled a failed battle with Hercules and sought refuge in the holy forest to create a fertility cult. Now, historians have long dismissed the Amazons as being nothing more than a fancy of the Greek imagination. Indeed, to the ancient Greeks, the Amazons were supposed to show how awful life would become if women were allowed a say in anything beyond what was for dinner. According to Greek legend, the Amazons would simply throw away any male children they had and seized any man they wanted as a husband. And of course, to the very patriarchal Greeks, that would have been a nightmare. One can only imagine what they would think if they knew that Amazons today had become symbols of female empowerment. Now, the Amazons may have been based on a real nation, the Scythians. What would have set the Scythians apart from the Greeks is, number one, they were nomads. Instead of building and living in cities, they simply roamed from place to place on horseback, driving their flocks and culture with them. In addition, the women fought alongside the men, riding on horseback and showering arrows upon their enemies. No doubt to the ancient Greeks, this would have been a horrifying spectacle. And it is possible that stories about the Amazons may have come from Greek glimpses of the Scythian women. Whatever the case, the sacred grove was later settled by the Greeks, who transformed it into a center of worship for Artemis, the Greek goddess of motherhood, the hunt, and fertility. In time, a great temple dedicated to the goddess Artemis was built there. Travelers came from as far away as India and Spain to make offerings. The temple built up a huge collection of jewelry and treasures from around the world and became so rich they were said to have even extended credit to the legendarily wealthy King Croesus himself. And in time, the temple grew. Over 120 years of construction, it was decorated with 127 Ionic columns, all adorned with sculptures and friezes of Greek mythology. They stood 60 feet tall each, and the temple itself was 377 feet long and 180 feet wide. A small army of priests and priestesses made sure that pilgrims sacrificed the correct animals to Artemis, and did so in the correct way. Pigs, cattle, goats, deer, and sheep, and even humans all went to Artemis in the temple. However, the temple also became the site of one of the most infamous arson cases in history. A man named Herostratus set fire to the temple on July 21st, 356 BC. Not because he wanted to insult Artemis or her worshippers, but simply because he wanted to be remembered forever and assumed that the burning of Temple of Artemis to chalk dust would do just that. As you can imagine, these city fathers of Ephesus were just a tad miffed at their hometown wonder of the world being torched by this would-be hero. So not only did they sentence him to be tortured to death, but they ordered that no one ever speak his name or write it down ever again. And unfortunately, a couple of rogue historians did indeed record Herostratus as the man who burned the Temple of Artemis, and that's why we know his name today. Thanks a lot, guys. The worshippers of Artemis wondered why the goddess had allowed her temple to be burned, and they soon got an answer during the career of Alexander the Great. See, Alexander the Great was born the same day that the Temple of Artemis burned, July 21st, 356 BC, and the worshippers of Artemis simply decided that the goddess of childbirth and fertility was too busy in Macedonia overseeing the birth of this great Greek hero to prevent the destruction of her temple back home in Ephesus. And perhaps given heart by that realization, the worshippers of Artemis in Ephesus proceeded to rebuild the temple to its former glory, and pretty soon it was receiving sacrifices from across the world once more. And while the temple was able to survive Herostratus, it did not survive a new religion. By the late 300s, the Roman Empire, which then ruled Ephesus, started to become Christian, and the Christians were not big fans of sites of pagan worship. Christian mobs began to ransack the temple and burned all the images of the Greek gods that they could get their hands on, and what they themselves did not finish, the raging barbarian hordes did, ransacking the temple and burning it once more. According to Greek mythology, the barbarians loaded up the treasures from the temple into boats to take back to their homeland. However, they were struck by lightning and sent to the bottom of the sea, where the treasures were never recovered. The worshippers of the old gods no doubt believed that Zeus, the father of Artemis, was just a tad annoyed at the desecration of his daughter's temple, and so he gave the ransackers what they had coming. And that wraps things up for the second wonder of the ancient world. Join me in a couple of days for an overview of the third. If you liked what you saw, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you have any ideas about things you'd like me to cover in the future, please let me know in the comments. I'm definitely open to input from my viewers. Thanks again for joining me, and have a great day.